Life in Christ. We are on Passions and Emotions, part 2. In the first part, we focused on passions. We said that we were going to separate passions and emotions, even though this is not often done. The reason for this is the progress in the understanding of emotions since the turn of the 20th century. The classical understanding of passions and emotions is still valid, and this was explained in the previous class. It is important, however, to incorporate new research that is widely accepted in the field, in particular, the model of the three core emotional drives, namely feeling safe, belonging, and significance. In this presentation, we'll also discuss the important notion of natural inclinations. This is clearly developed in St. Thomas Aquinas and is implicit in the Catechism, but it is often neglected in treatises on the moral life. Moral life is often presented as top-down or using a top-down approach. The moral or natural law is given and then it's applied to concrete actions. The moral law, however, is not given. There is a way that it comes to be known. Without this step, the study of morals becomes an ethic of obligation. In other words, externally imposed. Our culture no longer accepts norms because they come from an authority. They want to see it for themselves, feel it for themselves, we can say. This is where it becomes important to recover the notion of natural inclinations as the starting point of moral philosophy and theology. This is just the opposite of the top-down approach that is normally used. It is a ground-up approach, starting with drives on the physiological and emotional levels. This part 2 on passions and emotions has 3 parts. First, we will just talk about emotions. Secondly, we will discuss natural inclinations. And we will end with a discussion on the fundamental values and their corresponding virtues. Emotions. The first point on the slide says, emotions are impulses or sentiments connected to an awareness of self that powerfully influence choice. The emotional dimension of the human person is both spiritual and biological. Spiritual because it is related to a rational sense of self, of I. Biological because it's experienced as strong physiological impulses or drives. They lead to long-term behavioral patterns, not just immediate or short-term, as we saw with the passions. There are 3 fundamental emotional needs: feeling safe, sense of belonging, and sense of significance. Okay, we have this written on the slide. Let's just go through them. Feeling safe. An author called Antonio Malo called this the independent I, the I who wants to be independent. It is a core emotional need involving protection from harm and future well-being. It drives behaviors such as securing a home, securing one's possessions, saving for unexpected emergencies, seeking better work opportunities, things like that. Secondly, a sense of belonging, which Antonio Malo calls the I valued by another. It is the need to be loved and valued unconditionally. This emotion drives behavior such as keeping close to family and friends, personal sacrifice for the good of others in a community, feeling or fleeing loneliness and seeking to please others. Science has shown that strong relationships are central to happiness and longevity. There's a Harvard study over many years, decades, that proves this. And also, science shows that human connection is essential for emotional well-being. Thirdly, we have a sense of significance, which Antonio Malo calls the I valued for a role or contribution in society. The need for recognition and esteem for one's contribution is a very fundamental human need. The manifestations of this include working towards positions of prestige, obtaining recognition for achievements and expertise. At maturity, this develops into a sense of vocation. In other words, that means living for a purpose greater than oneself. And this is sustained by inner conviction rather than external praise or external honors or acknowledgement. It enables one to persevere through hardship. There are certain dilemmas and risks that are related to these fundamental needs. Okay, let's start with the first one, feeling safe. An excessive search for feeling safe. That can lead to excessive desire for material things, kind of individualism. It can lead to corruption. So having material things, but by bribes and criminal activity. Also, the deception and manipulation of others for material gain, the selling of oneself. These are dilemmas and risks associated with an excessive desire for feeling safe. The consequences are loneliness, anxiety, and low self-esteem. There are dilemmas and risks associated with an incoherent search for belonging, which can lead to, for example, dependencies in unhealthy relationships, involvement in gangs or criminal groups. As a consequence, there are dysfunctional and abusive relationships, and again, low self-esteem. Dilemmas and risks related to the incoherent search for significance. It can be the desire just to be seen as significant or stand out, and this can lead to antisocial actions or doing irrational things just to be seen. It can lead to also an excessive desire to be seen as original, projecting oneself as unique by committing risky behaviors, by seeking to be someone cool on social media, things like that. Consequence of this is feelings of frustration of self-worth, stress, anxiety, and again, low self-esteem. It belongs to the perfection of the moral good. We read on the slide, the last point. It belongs to the perfection of the moral good that the passions and emotions be regulated by reason. This is very clear in St. Thomas Aquinas in the second part of the first part, point 24, article 3. This is achieved through the virtues. The goal is that emotions must be guided by reason. They are good, but they must be guided by reason. We will now talk about natural inclinations. We have a definition up on the slide. Natural inclinations are powerful tendencies that lead to the apprehension by the intellect of fundamental goods related to the end of man. The principal inclinations are 1. The inclination to survival, 2. The sexual inclination, and 3. The inclination to know the truth about God and live in society. Okay, here we are following St. Thomas Aquinas exactly. The 3 inclinations identified by St. Thomas Aquinas can be matched to the core emotions that we just spoke about and are related to the apprehension of fundamental values as shown in the table below. So let's look at the slide. It says the inclination to survival has the corresponding emotion of feeling safe and which leads us to the apprehension of the fundamental value of life. The inclination or the sexual inclination, it causes the corresponding emotion of belonging, or as Antonio Malo says, I valued by or appreciated by another for who I am. And this leads to the fundamental good or value of friendship and family. Then we have the inclination of to know the truth about God and live in society, has the corresponding emotion of a sense of significance, or as Antonio Malo says, I valued for my role or contribution in society. And the fundamental good or value that is related to this is that we discovered or apprehended is the value of society. Here we have the final slide showing the fundamental goods, values, and their corresponding virtues. We have the fundamental goods, values in the center: life, family, friendship. We discussed how these are apprehended by the intellect from natural inclinations that have their corresponding emotions. And around each we have the corresponding virtues. So for life, we have the virtues of diligence, industriousness, fortitude, temperance, and order. You will see that some of the virtues there are related to work, because to sustain life, to nurture life, we have to work. And so we have the virtues of work: diligence, industriousness, and order. Around family friendship, we have chastity, charity, cordiality, and loyalty. So these are important virtues for having a good family and for having meaningful friendships. And then finally, for society, we have the virtues of generosity, justice, and prudence.